I'm Jackson Pearce, and this video is about misplaced bodies. So I'm into history, more specifically the personal lives of famous historical figures. Yes, I think it's very interesting to know the dates in which a king reigned, but I'm really more intrigued by, how many mistresses he had, or what were his hobbies. Basically, I am into history the same way I am into gossip columns, I like to pry. All of that prying means I have kind of a weird collection of historical knowledge, and so in this video I'm going to share that knowledge with you and talk about 3 historical body mix-ups. Alright, here we go. Number 1, Louis XVII of France. Louis XVII was the son of Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI. Sadly, Louis had a pretty rough life. When he was only 7 years old, his family was overthrown and imprisoned. Over the next few years, his family was systematically executed and he was moved from one terrible prison to another. He eventually died in prison from tuberculosis and his body was buried without a marker. His heart, however, was cut out and preserved separately because apparently that was tradition at the time. You preserve the heart and bury the body of royals. The doctor who cut the heart out, however, he kept it for a while just for kicks, and eventually a student stole it, and then when the student died, the student's wife returned it to the doctor. Then the Spanish branch of the Bourbon family got it, and then they sent it back to France, and then it was interred in France, but it was only known as the heart of a child who died during the French Revolution. Nobody really remembered that it was Louis XVII's heart. Apparently, someone did their homework though and suspected the heart belonged to Louis XVII, and so they DNA tested it against a lock of Marie Antoinette's hair from her childhood in Austria. And lo and behold, the heart did belong to Louis XVII, and it is amazing that it wasn't lost after all of these years of changing hands and madness. Louis's heart is now interred with the rest of his family in the royal crypt, so kind of happy ending, I guess. Number 2, Amelia Earhart. Everybody knows Amelia Earhart's story, but just in case, she was this rock star female pilot who tried to circumnavigate the globe in the 1930s. Unfortunately, she didn't make it around the globe. She and her plane disappeared over the Pacific Ocean. Most people think the plane crashed into the water and sank, but there are a few people who think Amelia managed to land the plane on an uninhabited island in the Pacific named Gardner Island. This theory is largely based on several archaeological finds on the island, like a size 9 women's cat paw heel from the 1930s, some improvised tools, some pieces of metal that may have come from the plane, and this piece of glass that was the exact thickness and curvature as her plane's windshield. Oh, and a skeleton! Yeah, they found a skeleton on the island. The skeleton was found by a British guy on the island in 1940, and he sent it to Fiji where some other British guys determined it belonged to a short man. But in 1998, some forensic anthropologists looked at the measurements of that skeleton and they determined that it probably belonged to a tall white woman. Like Amelia Earhart. Unfortunately, we will never be able to DNA test the skeleton because it was misplaced in Fiji a long time ago. They lost a skeleton. Who loses a skeleton? I mean, I lose my car keys all the time, but I like to think that if I were in charge of human remains, that I would maybe keep tabs on them. I'm still pretty mad about this, Fiji. You best find that skeleton. And number 3, Anastasia Romanov. Now, some of you have probably seen the animated Anastasia movie, but let's just say that was a teensy bit inaccurate, although it had great songs. In a nutshell, Anastasia was the Grand Duchess of Russia, but during the Bolshevik Revolution, she and her family were captured and killed in 1918. However, in 1991, when the secret gravesite of the Romanov family was finally excavated, there were 2 bodies missing. One of the missing bodies belonged to Anastasia's little brother, Alexei, and the other missing body either belonged to Anastasia or Anastasia's sister, Maria. It was never really clear. Either way, missing royal family body equals scandal, and so it just furthered speculation that Anastasia Romanov had survived her family's murder. But alas, in 2007, 2 additional bodies were discovered at a bonfire site. Apparently, the Bolsheviks very intentionally disposed of those 2 bodies separately. That way, if the graves were ever discovered, the body count would be wrong and no one would realize they'd murdered the royal family. DNA testing proved that the bodies belonged to Alexei and one of his sisters, but we've still never been able to determine which body is Maria and which body is Anastasia. That said, all of the Romanov family has now been accounted for, and so there were no survivors, despite what movies tell you. It's very sad. Alright, I hope that was informative and will help you out when playing Trivia Sunday, and I will see you guys tomorrow.